Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Mike Norvell, the Florida State Seminoles, continue the momentum in the transfer portal, landing another commitment. This one coming from former Alabama offensive lineman Terence Ferguson. And it seems like at this point, we are doing daily updates on Florida State and their activity in the transfer portal. Terence Ferguson, a guy that I went back, watched some of the game of USF, his only start for Alabama in the 2023 season. What you're getting here is a big functional athlete. And I think the thing I want to focus on is you can't really teach what Terence Ferguson brings to the table. I think that's why he was so highly coveted coming out of high school as a former top 100 national prospect. And again, why he's so coveted coming out of the transfer portal as the third rated interior offensive lineman available. Teams like Oklahoma wanted him. Alabama was also pushing to get Terence Ferguson back at Alabama. And that probably tells you something. It probably tells you that Alabama liked what they had in Terence Ferguson. They saw him in practice for the last 3 years. So I think Florida State, you're probably feeling pretty good about this guy. I want to talk Terence Ferguson. Also want to give a couple more updates on some more visitors for Florida State this weekend. And at the end, I do want to talk about Mike Norvell and the connections to the Alabama head coach job. And I'll start with this. I think this just shows like Mike Norvell, when you do an excellent job like he's done at Tallahassee, you're going to get connected to jobs like Alabama and like he was connected to Texas A&M. My take on it is Florida State is a phenomenal program. I think he loves it in Tallahassee. And I think more importantly, you can see Florida State continuing to build. And the same conversation I had with Dan Lanning at Oregon, another hot head coach that was connected to the Alabama job. Like both of those programs are programs you want to buy stock in now. So for me, I think Mike Norvell, I'd be surprised if he's going to Alabama. We'll see obviously in the coming days. More importantly, though, want to talk about Terence Ferguson, want to talk about what Florida State is going after in the transfer portal. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys and a shout out to the Florida State fans. This has been a program that, again, we are probably doing daily updates on what they are doing in the transfer portal. I'm having a blast breaking down all these commitments. Cannot thank you guys enough for rocking with the boys. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, I want to get into Terence Ferguson and give a little bit more context to what I think about Terence Ferguson, a guy that we talked about yesterday as potentially being a target for Florida State. And I think what you're most excited about is what Terence Ferguson can be on this Florida State offensive line, an offensive line unit that we kind of continue to say throughout the 2023 season. Florida State checked off a lot of boxes in terms of being a national champion contender, right? They had the skill position. They obviously had the quarterback. They had a lot of really elite aspects about this Florida State team. There was one unit that I always said maybe was lacking behind the rest, and that was the offensive line. And by no means was the offensive line not good for Florida State. I just didn't know if it was an elite caliber. Now, what excites me most about Terence Ferguson is he's a guy that has the capability of being a national championship quality offensive lineman, right? There was a reason he was extremely coveted coming out of high school, and there's a reason he's extremely coveted as his name has hit the transfer portal. And you're Florida State. You're looking at continuing to build a national championship caliber team. I think Mike Norvell saw that offensive line as being a unit that you can upgrade some talent and kind of further that depth in competition. And I would be very surprised if Terence Ferguson doesn't come into this Florida State program and immediately compete and start at one of the interior offensive line spots for the Florida State Seminoles, a guy that, again, you can't really teach the physical traits that he has. Like, this is the type of body that you want it to look like on this Florida State offensive line. And again, going back and watching his only start at USF, played some really good football. And that was that game that was a ton of rain. It was kind of a slop fest, but they were running the football, getting some movement on the offensive line. And you see Terence Ferguson have the athleticism, not only the athleticism, but the power to move people off the line of scrimmage, work up to linebackers. Excited about what Terence Ferguson can continue to kind of morph into during his time at Florida State, another guy with 2 seasons of eligibility left. And a conversation that we've had, Mike Norvell grabbing a lot of guys in the portal that are not one and done kind of guys, that guys are having multiple years of eligibility to come into this Florida State program and get developed. And I think that's a key to Mike Norvell and his success that he has had in the transfer portal the last couple of years. Want to talk about a few other targets for Florida State that will be taking visits this weekend for the Noles. And I want to start with another guy on the offensive line. And I think it kind of shows Mike Norvell wants to kind of increase the depth, increase the talent level, and increase the competition that is going on at that Florida State offensive line. Talking about Richie Leonard IV, a guy that started 12 games for the Florida Gators in 2023. What I like about Richie Leonard the most is I think he's a really good run blocker. And this is a guy that is 6'2", 310, kind of that fire hydrant build, right? Terence Ferguson, a little bit of a bigger frame at 6'4". Richie Leonard, a little bit more squatty, plays with low pad level, can move people off the line of scrimmage, and also is really good in pass protection. And I think the probably number one thing that you're getting with Richie Leonard IV is just a reliable guy. I mean, it is hard to find offensive linemen that have played all 12 games and have held their starting spot and don't get banged up. Richie Leonard IV was that guy for the Florida Gators. I mean, they were moving guys all around that offensive line. Richie Leonard IV was playing at that guard spot pretty consistently for the Florida Gators. So if you can get Richie Leonard IV and how they balance out with Terence Ferguson, I think Terence Ferguson, I think the upside is probably higher with a guy like Terence Ferguson because I think he's bigger. I think he's a little bit more athletic, but maybe a guy that you're not sure if he's going to reach that potential. With Richie Leonard IV, I think you know what you're getting. You're getting a quality starting interior offensive lineman that's going to come in and add reliability and depth and talent to this offensive line. I would really like to see the addition of Richie Leonard IV and continue to build that depth and competition within that Florida State offensive line. Now, the last guy I want to talk about in terms of Florida State targets, and I mean, we've talked about probably 20 plus Florida State targets to this point for Florida State. The last guy I think would be a really nice addition is in that running back room, and former Alabama running back Roydell Williams, and obviously Terence Ferguson, his teammate at Alabama, locking in with Florida State. This probably helps where Florida State stands with the recruitment of Roydell Williams, who the number 7 running back in the transfer portal, and for good reason. Has Roydell Williams ever been a featured running back for Alabama? No. But that's not because Roydell Williams is not a good running back. That's just more because they have a really deep room that they rotate those guys in and out. Now, Roydell Williams has been extremely productive at Alabama, right? Over 230 carries for over 1,100 yards, averages 5 yards per carry on his career. And a guy that, more importantly, when you look at the Florida State running back room, one, you're obviously losing Trey Benson. You're obviously losing some depth pieces. You probably want to just add some bodies in that room, not to be a guy, Cam Davis, coming into that 2024 class is going to be a dude and play early, but you want some veteran presence. And you also want to balance a guy out like Lawrence Tuafili, who is a guy that we all know what he can do when he's in open space, right? One of the more shifty, one of the more dynamic running backs in the country in terms of being I don't want to call him a gadget running back, but probably not a guy that you want to be a workhorse in your offense. So you want another running back can be more of the bell cow of the guy. And Roydell Williams, I think, kind of fits that description perfectly. 5'10", 210 plus pounds, a thick lower half, can take on contact, can run between the tackles, and a guy that has been really productive at the SEC for the last couple of years. And going into his 5th year of college football, I think provides you exactly what you're looking for in terms of a more physical running back that has a ton of experience. And then you look at that Florida State running back room, Lawrence Tuafili, Roydell Williams, and another guy I'm really excited about, Cam Davis, coming in as a true freshman. You suddenly feel pretty good about what Florida State has in that running back room. So Roydell Williams, another really good target for Florida State, who I think wants to add a running back in the portal. They went after Penny Boone from Toledo. He ended up going to Louisville. Now, I want to have that quick conversation about Mike Norvell. Now, I think the first thing that comes to my mind, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday in terms of the candidates that have emerged as top targets for Alabama. Obviously, Mike Norvell's name is going to get thrown around there. And I think that just highlights the job that Mike Norvell's done at Florida State. I mean, he is one of the better head coaches in college football. So if you're a Florida State fan, you're flattered that Mike Norvell is considered a candidate for the Alabama Crimson Tide head coaching spot. When I look at Florida State and I look at Alabama, what Mike Norvell's building, the momentum he has on the recruiting trail, the momentum he has coming out of that 2023 season, and how much he seems to like coaching at Florida State, I would be personally, and I don't have a dog in this race, right? I would be extremely surprised to see Mike Norvell get up and leave Tallahassee. I think he's a phenomenal coach at Florida State. I think what he's built there, I think he's excited about the future. To come in and take an Alabama program that you're coming off a 16-year tenure with Nick Saban, the greatest to ever do it, I would be surprised. And I think that this commitment probably makes Florida State fans a little bit more confident about Mike Norvell's future at Florida State. right? I don't think he wants to go anywhere. I don't think he'd be landing a commitment in the transfer portal if he was going to hop over to Alabama, especially with that player formerly playing for Alabama. So my take is I'm not surprised that Mike Norvell's name is getting thrown out in the head coaching vacancy because he is one of the best head coaches that we see at college football right now. But I would be surprised if he leaves Tallahassee to go to Tuscaloosa. But again, Florida State continuing the momentum in the transfer portal. We'll continue to update you guys as the commitments roll in. Appreciate you guys consistently rocking with the boys. It really does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.